Good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the jungle. I am your host, Hamilton Winters, strategist with Liger Partners. And I'm just excited. I'm excited to be back in the studio. I'm excited to be here this morning, joined by two of my now good friends, Todd Palmer and Beth Miller. Todd, Beth, how's it going this morning?
Oh, excited to be here.
Very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
This is an extraordinary day for us. I'm usually only getting the chance to interview one person. This is a three-person conversation that I have the pleasure of moderating. Why don't we do this? Todd, as CEO of Extraordinary Advisors, tell us a little bit about you and how you came on the show today. Kind of give us the background.
Sure. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here like we talked about. I was a CEO of a staffing and recruiting firm for a little under 25 years, so almost half of my life. And I've now pivoted my life, and now I'm working in helping others grow and scale their businesses by doing inside-out leadership training through my company, Extraordinary Advisors. And I'm here at the gracious invitation of our wonderful friend here, Beth Miller, who we met, about a dozen years ago at a conference, yes. And we've stayed in touch. And through the challenges of our current times during COVID, Beth was generous enough to reach out and ask me if I wanted to participate, and I couldn't have been more thrilled to hear from her.
Well, we're both glad to have you. And Beth, why don't you piggyback onto that with your experience as an executive coach and talent management advisor with your company, Executive Velocity, who I've been a beneficiary of. Give us a little bit of background on you and kind of lead us into this escaping the undertow of chaos and crisis.
Yeah, so my work focuses with those small, mid-sized companies, generally 30 employees, upwards of 300. They are looking to grow and develop those high potential leaders that are coming up through the ranks. Many times I'm working with somebody who is some sort of subject matter expert, but isn't prepared for leadership. But they understand, the leadership understands that they have potential for that, but they want to make sure that they're prepared. So I spend a lot of time coaching as well as training those future leaders. I'm in conjunction with those senior execs and business owners, but privately held companies, that's my sweet spot. I also, like Todd, was a business owner, and we did consulting and staffing work. So that's kind of how Todd and I connected, was through a staffing association meeting, many years ago.
No, it makes sense. It makes total sense. And I'm glad that you made that connection so that we can do this today. Before we dive headfirst into our conversation today, just want to tell all the viewers out there watching on LinkedIn or Facebook that we'll be fielding your questions. So send those questions in. I would love, as much as I love to ask questions, I'd much rather ask your questions because they're your questions. So why don't we do this? I can only imagine that you two get what you do confused quite a lot. And maybe there's a lot of overlap there of, how do I know if I need Beth or how do I know if I need Todd? Todd, I'll start with you. What is your differentiating factor? I know you gave me a little bit of this insight yesterday on our phone call, but for the folks watching out there, how do they know that they need Todd Palmer in their life?
So that's a great question. I think it's important that we set the platform right up front so people can understand exactly the wonderful value that Beth can bring, as well as the value that hopefully I can bring to them. My sweet spot is I work with entrepreneurs. I work with leaders of organizations, typically founders and startup people. Revenue would be anywhere from $500,000 to a little, $10 to $20 million in revenue. And I do a lot of inside out work. I hired a coach. I nearly crashed my business when I was an active CEO. And I realized 10 years in that I didn't have to have all the answers to all the problems all the time. And I didn't have to listen to my imposter syndrome and the challenges it was bringing to me, because I got the business $600,000 in debt. I almost ran out of my money. And at that point, I hired a coach. And that coach taught me some things that I didn't know about leadership, taught me some things I didn't know about financial literacy, about having tough conversations with people. And so I was deficient in those areas. And once I fixed those, then the business took off. We made the Inc. 5000 an amazing 6 times. It's one of the fastest growing companies in America. Wow. So now when I work with my leaders, I teach them the things that I learned. And I still use a coach. I use a neuroscientist out of the California area who helps me work a lot with the mindset pieces. So typically what I focus on are leaders of small companies, again, 500 to 20 million. And I typically work with the CEO or their small leadership teams and getting them unstuck, getting them wrapped around what's holding them back from a leadership perspective, from a mindset perspective. We often do a lot of work around the things that got them to where they aren't going to get them where they want to go. And I think that the real difference that Beth brings to the table, from my understanding, is Beth works, I think, with companies in a little bit of a different space.
Yeah, that's correct, Todd. More of my work is around the strategy around talent within the organization. So, the company has a business plan, but they may not have the right people in the right place. So I help with, assessing the key leaders in the organization, determine what kind of development they need, what type of positions are missing based on their future plans, and how do they go about filling those? Can those be filled internally, or do they need to go externally to find those positions? So I work with the leaders, but it's generally the talent management aspect of it versus the coaching aspect. The coaching generally is with the high potentials when they're developed.
So basically, I think, Hamilton, I would help the leaders figure out that they need to hire talent, and then we bring Beth in, and she would help them lay out the strategy for the talent, because I don't do any of that.
Yeah.
I love it. That's
good summation.
That's perfect. That's perfect. One thing that you both mentioned is the individuals, right? Whether it's Todd and the entrepreneur or business owner, or it's Beth with the talent, right? The high potential talent, or the decisions that you make. Therefore, based on that information, it's all about the individual. And Mitt Romney in 2012, when he was running for president, said a kind of controversial quote, which is, corporations are people.
Yeah.
And you had one side that said, no, they're absolutely not. And then one side that says, yes, they absolutely are.
Yeah.
Based on what I'm hearing from you is that it doesn't matter about the business if the people aren't right. Would you agree with that?
Totally. 100%.
And in this environment where people are, I hate the word unprecedented because everybody uses it all day long nowadays. But in this unprecedented, quote unquote, environment, how can folks escape that undertow of chaos and crisis from a people perspective? And Todd, I'll throw that to you. I know that's kind of a loaded question there, but I'll take from that and we'll kind of run with it. But how do you escape that?
Well, I love the framework around that. It's a people issue, because it's always a people issue. Businesses only have four pieces to them. I always tell when I speak at universities or I speak to small business groups, business isn't complicated. It's four pieces. It's cash, it's strategy, it's execution, and it's staff. It's the complicated part when people manage the cash and people manage the strategy and people mess up the execution and people hire cousin Bob to come work for them because he's your golfing buddy and he's unemployed. That's where it all gets all messed up. And so during these tough times, I think the biggest thing a leader needs to do is to communicate, and then communicate again. Mm-hmm. And even to the point, like I was working with somebody this week where they wanted to get messaging out to their staff and they were sending out emails, which is nothing wrong with email, but they were not getting engagement. And they were nervous to have any type of verbal or video communication with them because they were insecure. Their imposter syndrome was saying, well, I don't have the answers to this situation. I'm not sure what the business is going to look like once we're through this. And I really challenged her to create a video and send it out to her entire team, which she eventually did. And she got immediate engagement. And in that video, she greeted them by saying, I'm thinking of all of you. You are important to me. As leaders, that we need to reinforce to our teams that the people matter. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters are the people, whether it's the customers or the internal staff. And I say leaders, if we do a great job as leaders, we make it really easy for our people to work with us, and we make it really easy for our clients to work with us. So communicate that. And she did. And she sent me a text message afterwards saying, out of the 20 leaders I reached out to, 18 got back to me within 3 minutes, and 14 of them sent me a video message back that they were thinking of me. And it's that connection. It's that. I understand the phrase social distancing is being used. I really think it's more of how can we create physical distancing with social connection. So I'm encouraging my leaders, communicate.
Mm. That's strong.
I'm seeing that as well, Todd. The communication and the communication is, there's been a flip flop. Pre-COVID, the leaders communicated as it related to results. What are we getting? What are we driving towards first? Then they would talk about the people. Now they talk about the people first. They're really concerned, especially when we're still doing Zoom meetings, that they really check in with their folks to make sure that they're all doing well, because we all have different situations back home while we're working, and you can't observe that. You need to inquire, and that's the big change I've seen, and I'm hopeful that leaders have learned through this, and that they continue to put people first, and then the results will come. I mean, there's obviously a balancing act. You don't want to just focus on people and forget about the results. But if you treat your people well, they're going to be more engaged, which in fact, DDI just did a survey recently, and they have found that employee engagement has increased over the last 2 months. And they attribute that to the fact that leaders have made a shift and really focused on their people first. So I'm hopeful that will continue as we re-enter the workplace.
Well, I think the leaders who are willing to re-engage with that sense of curiosity, to connect with people, it's those connections that are going to make the reintegration easier, as well as I think I've got clients that are thriving right now based upon those communications. So I love what you're sharing in that report. I'm gonna have to get a copy of that, because I think it's so important that we share that message with people today, that even within the tragedy, there is opportunity within these, in those opportunities. Now, when you get quantifiable data behind it,
exactly.
I'm super excited.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead of us. It's just kind of navigating that chaos. Employees now, they're starting to enter the workforce or the workplace, and there are people that are fearful, and you need to be really transparent with them that you don't have all the solutions either. That there might be an uptick in COVID. Well, what's your plan? Communicate that plan to them now versus trying to figure out when it happens. They need to feel safe.
It makes perfect sense. And both of you have said things that I can only imagine, in my mind at least, is common sense, right? You know these things, that you need to communicate, and you need to invest in your people, and it's people first. Where do you find that gap in between what should be common sense and where you guys come in to be the voice on the shoulder saying, you already knew this, but you need me to tell you, right? Because I can only imagine that that's where your value is. It's when you're in the midst of your business and you're running all four of those compartments, like Todd said, you're not thinking about these things that should be common sense. I mean, kind of extend upon that, if you will. And Beth, I'll throw that one to you, and then Todd, you can answer right after. Tell me if I'm totally off basis. But
no,
that's the feeling that I'm getting.
I mean, a lot of it is common sense, but the fact of the matter is we're sitting here, and we're not in the middle of what they're dealing with. So often they have a tunnel vision, and asking some stupid questions to them gets them to kind of think differently and readjust. I was having a conversation with an HR manager, and just last week, she was really concerned because there were a number of people that she felt had a lot of fear. And I said, well, you may not be able to help them. If it's fear that's irrational, then, you've got an employee assistance program. Why not, direct them to employees? And here's an HR person who was like, oh, that's a really good idea. like, really? Isn't that your job? But what she did was she took that information, and in the weekly newsletter that she sent out to employees, she highlighted the employee assistance program. So she communicated that to all the employees. And then to those few that she felt needed some additional help, she directed them right to that. So that's it's not brain surgery.
It should be right there. You can't see the forest for the trees, but I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
That makes total sense. Todd, what do you think?
Well, three things came to mind for me. One, especially with the entrepreneurial leaders that I work with, I'm dealing a lot with pride and ego, a lot, because they do feel like they are often are the smartest kid in the room, and they don't have the answers, which really goes to their sense of self. So I do a lot of work around it, and I share a lot of stories with them of clients and even of myself of having to get unstuck around those things. Combining that with, where does that pride and ego come from? Why is that so important? And where does that take them? And where it typically takes them, I found, is fight or flight. And the brain doesn't work. It can't be in a creative operating position as well as in fight or flight. It's like the elevator, up and down, and it can't be in both places at the same time. So I think what people rely on, folks like myself and potentially other coaches in that space, is to get them out of fight or flight. And it really, I find that works, just like we're just talking about, asking them a lot of questions, because then the brain calms down, and then they're less reactive. And I love the fact that, well, you have an employee assistance program. Oh yeah, she probably put it in place. So we get so wrapped up, like forest for the trees, is we get so wrapped up in trying to figure out the entire journey. And it's so, I've seen this so much within politicians, is they're trying to address COVID, which I see COVID as being very much a marathon. It's a long-term play. And they're trying to address it with a sprinter's mentality, where if I just give it all out now and get there now, it'll be said and done, and I can move on to something else. I think as leaders, we're gonna have the same challenge. We don't know if there's gonna be another wave. We don't know what we don't know. So if we approach it with more of a benchmarking mindset, okay, I've reached the 5-mile marker, the 10-mile marker, the 15-mile marker, we can make pivots and different choices through there, and then we don't have to have all the answers, because we're going to be getting all senses of new information, all new data points to incorporate into our decision-making framework. I think we can slow down. I know entrepreneurs we love the bright and shiny, we like the bigger, brighter now, yesterday, but if we can slow down, hit those benchmarks, recognize that, the world can be different in 3 weeks. It can be different in 3 months, and it may not, and either one is okay. But it's okay, and we can give ourselves the permission, and we can deal with our pride and ego by recognizing that we don't have to have all the answers all the time, and we can give out the information we do have today.
Todd makes a really good point about the fact that entrepreneurs are always quick, and speed is really important to them. And one of the things I try and do is get them to slow down as well. Slow down from a standpoint of making decisions, and slow down to make themselves healthier, to provide the care and nurturing they need to be giving employees. You got to take care of yourself first before you can.
Absolutely. So glad you brought that up. Self-care right now is so incredibly critical. And self-care can mean, if you got 5 entrepreneurs, it can mean 5 different things to them. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs are very extroverted. Well, they couldn't go out and be very social for a very long time, so they're just like collapsing within, and they don't know what to do. And they're, so I've got some entrepreneurs who are struggling in their relationships right now, and they're trapped at home, and their norm has been upset. So self-care, and so much can be said from a meditative perspective, from a journaling perspective, from watching programs like this right now, finding a tribe, finding a community. There's a lot we can do for self-care. And there's a big difference between being focused on self-care versus selfish. When we do self-care, think of ourselves as a reservoir and as like a bucket of water. And if we put more bucket in, when we have to give abundantly to others, there's more to give. When we're selfish, that's not how we're behaving. And so many entrepreneurs get wrapped up in thinking, well, I'm being selfish. I'm like, no, self-care is critical right now. So you've got more to give to your family, to the poor kids who've lost graduations, who've not been able to be part of their social peer network, and your employees and your friends and your network. If your reservoirs are low, your resources are depleted and the demands increase, we can't be who we want to show up and be authentically.
Yeah. It's the old adage of put your mask on first before putting on a mask for a child or somebody that needs assistance. Yeah.
Wow.
Well said.
No, I love that. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and to use your example, Todd, I love metaphors. Love them. I think that's why I get Jesus so much. He just always talked in metaphors, and so it's like being a diver as an extrovert. I'm underwater, but that social interaction is the air that I breathe. And when I can't breathe, what's the first thing that I'm going to do? I'm going to rush to whatever air or oxygen source there is, which it's wherever the light is. I'm constantly chasing the light, whether there's air there or not. And what you're saying is slow down, breathe, right? Slowly, because it takes up less of that oxygen, and you can think clearly with your head of where is the best next step forward of how to get to the air that you can breathe. And I love that analogy.
Yeah,
I love it. I'm sure you're seeing that right now.
Oh, totally. And I actually got it from the military. I mean, when you're a general in the military, I think his name was McChrystal. I listened to him on a program, and he talked so much like they make life and death decisions for people with sometimes very little information.
Yeah.
So they can't rush to make a decision, but they have to be time sensitive to make the decision because their information data points are constantly changing in the middle of battle. Well, we're in a battle as well. And I don't mean to be taking massive liberty with the phrase of life and death, but there are people who have to make decisions now for the businesses. I worked with somebody recently who decided to close his business. And it was a tough decision. Once he made that decision, and it was the right decision to make, then as his coach, I had to help him reframe what a new version of success for him and his family would look like. And within 2 weeks, I'm so proud of him. He came up with 2 different ways to be of service to his community. He was a mechanical design engineer by training, and he was actually overseas in India, and he went to his local hospital and volunteered his time. And he came up with different processes of process improvement for implementing different medical procedures. Then he got connected with somebody in the ventilator space, and he came up with a better design. Now he's looking at getting all with this, and he sent me a message. The time difference, we always text, and he's like, I'm in such a better headspace, he calls it, because now I'm seeing a different future. It's a brighter future for me and my family. And I'm now so thankful that I can see abundance, not scarcity, where 6 weeks ago all I saw was just doom and gloom.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, I've watched a lot of World War II documentaries, and D-Day was just a couple of days ago. And you see that during some of the worst times is when that ingenuity comes forward. You're like, hey, look, I don't need to wear pantyhose. I need to send out that silk to make parachutes for the soldiers. And you start wondering, how can I put my talents and abilities towards a greater good? What I want to pivot to, and this is something that you both hit on a little bit earlier, and I want to dive deeper into. You both have an extremely large and robust amount of experience in your sectors and in your fields. What trends are you seeing that you think will be different, right? How will people change during and after this experience than they were beforehand? And what does that look like for what you two do? And I'll toss it to Todd first, and then I'll toss it over to Beth. What are you seeing? Because it's almost like we've gone through this tunnel and now we're looking towards the light at the other end. We don't know when we're going to quite get there, but how will people be different on the other side of the tunnel than they were before they entered?
It's such an interesting question. I was supposed to be on 6 different stages giving talks. And they were, I mean, for me, as kind of that breakthrough moment, my calendar was filled. I was going to be in 3 different countries. I was going to be traveling the world, working with entrepreneurs. And within 2 weeks, all of my gigs got canceled. And I had to, so the first thing I had to do, and this is what I'm seeing a lot of people do, is we're anchoring in on why we do what we do. I was blessed about a dozen years ago, right around the time I met Beth. I was working with a guy named Simon Sinek before his first book came out. And he helped me figure out my why. And it took me 2 years to figure out 2 words. My 2 words are improve lives. So I thought, well, how else can I improve lives since I can't speak from stage and be in the same room and enjoy the energy of entrepreneurs, because their energy is like no other energy I've ever experienced. And so I've been going online. So now my content is being reformatted, repurposed for my second book so that it can be delivered online in a virtual space. So the messaging can get out there. And it was amazing. Once I had that shift and then the creativity started coming, I just spoke to an entrepreneur group in Malaysia. 75 people showed up. They never would have showed up to see me in person, but they showed up online. It was awesome. the feedback I got and the fact that they cared, like that, I stayed up till midnight East Coast time to go talk to them was so good. So I'm seeing people doubling down on their purpose and their passion and their why. I'm seeing people working and communicating differently, like we talked about earlier, with their teams. And I think last, and I think this is a great transition into Beth, is I'm seeing so many more leaders recognizing the value of their people, not necessarily of other things. And they're doubling down on putting training programs together, investing in safe workplace environments, creating processes to connect people. I got one, she's awesome. She's at Texas, and every Friday she sends a gift basket of some sort to her 25 employees to let them know that she's thinking of them.
Wow.
1 week it was coffee. 1 week she had alcohol delivery, which I was just dying when she was telling me this. And they all got the call and they had happy hours. So I think that investment in people is huge.
Yeah. No, I agree, Todd. The people aspect is, I think, has changed permanently. There'll be some people that go back to their bad ways, but for the most part, leaders have seen the results, and so they're self-reflecting and figuring out, okay, what has worked over this period of time that was change related, and what do I need to continue to do? What do we need not bring back? What are those things that we were doing in the past that we just need to stop doing? It's analyzing and learning through this process and taking that learning and applying it. And as it relates to people, it's that communications. I mean, when people first went into lockdown and were working from home and Zoom, companies were having meetings twice a day. Now, they're now probably having meetings twice a week. But that ability to communicate on a consistent basis and being very purposeful about the meetings. I was talking to one client who was down to 3 meetings a week. Mondays were kind of working in the business. Wednesdays was working on the business. And then Friday was celebrating rewards and recognition. So they created a new cadence for meetings that they're going to continue on as they move back into the workplace. Mm-hmm. So it's those kinds of innovations that have occurred that are going to continue as we move forward.
I love that. There are 2 words that I kind of boiled down both of your comments into, that it's awareness and it's application. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. And I made a post the other day on social media that 2020 is not the problem. It's exposing all of the problems. Right? Everybody's blaming the year. The year didn't do anything. It just seems like everything's boiling up at one time to expose that our pot is boiling over and we need to fix it. Maybe we need to turn the temperature down. Maybe we need to add the noodles instead of going and watching TV while the pot's overflowing.
Yeah.
At the end, you can't have one without the other. Awareness is needless and unnecessary without the application to do something about it. And application's only as good as being aware that you need to fix something. And so It seems like what you guys do is not only bring awareness, but you also work with these business owners and talent to apply what it is that needs to happen in order to change for the better.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting that I love your analogy. So the first thing I was talking with a client last week was about how when they had a bunch of cash coming in the door and they were super profitable, it covered all the problems. Mm-hmm. And the analogy we came up with was the tide coming in and the tide coming out. Well, once the tide went out so far and you saw all the wrecks of the ships that have crashed into their shore, you're like, oh my gosh, we've got all these problems we need to address. And what we worked on is we have a process I teach called intention, not expectation. And they went into it with a very intentional mindset of our intention is we're going to figure out how to solve these, but we're going to create dialogues through our chats with our staff they talk on a daily huddle model. And we're going to put out different challenges. We're going to hear feedback from people. And I bet we hear better ideas than if just the leadership team was siloed in a vacuum and was only coming up with them. And so once they were able to embrace that intentionality, that intention versus expectation model, they feel that then once they come back, they're going to even be in a healthier spot. And what they identified was so interesting is they had some clients that they're going to fire because they don't fit the core values of the organization. Because when they look at the wreckage that was around them, the wreckage was really created by about 15% of their clients. And then they took the really tough conversation of, they looked at the profitability of those clients and they realized they were some of the least profitable clients they had.
It's a great exercise to do. You find a lot out when you start looking at your customers and being empowered to fire them. I mean, I remember early on in my work, I was working with a company, and they had a leader, it turned out, who was toxic. Mm-hmm. I started going around and interviewing the executive team, and all of them were ready to quit. So it's like, this is not a good situation. Mm-hmm. So I had a frank conversation with the leader, and he didn't get it. He just didn't get it. And so I said, I don't think you're ready for me yet. Mm. And he's like, are you firing me? I said, no, I just don't think you're ready for me yet.
That's hilarious. I mean, the strongest relationships, if we're really thinking about the relationships that you have in life, business especially, the strongest relationships are the ones that you want, not the ones that you need, right? Yeah. And that feeling of, I have to keep this client because I need their business, because I don't know how I'm going to make ends meet, is such a different headspace than, I want to keep this client because I enjoy working with them.
There was another experience years and years ago where we had a client, it was a good client, but they wanted us to do a specific project that we could not determine scope of the project. So I basically went back to him and said, listen, we can't do this. We can't get our arms around what this is going to take. And about a year later, he shared with me that there was a company that decided they were going to do it, and it blew up. And he said, Beth, you were so right not to say no to that project.
Touch a landmine.
So it built a lot of credibility by saying no.
Wow. No, that makes total sense. I love this conversation. I could talk to you both all day long. And I know others that are watching and have been listening in could as well. Talking about the relationship. If these folks want to form a relationship with either one of you, continue the conversation, and they find that they could use your services, because I think we all could. I've benefited from Beth's. I'd love to benefit from yours one day, Todd, if you find me to be worthy. But how could they continue the conversation? How can they get in touch with you? How can they read some of your material and get a little taste of what that would look like? And I'll start with Todd, then I'll go to Beth, and we can kind of wrap up that way.
Sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity again, Hamilton and Beth. It's been a joy to be with you guys. I've loved the conversation as well. If anybody's interested in talking with me, what I've been doing is I really feel like my time now has been to be of servant leadership. So I've been giving 30 minutes of my time to entrepreneurs literally from as far away as Cape Town, South Africa, in Jerusalem. I've been all over the globe thanks to technology, and I'm happy to give that to anybody today. So anybody who wants to talk to me for 30 minutes, no charge. I don't have a sales funnel. I probably should. I'm not the world's greatest marketer. I'm happy to give 30 minutes for free. Reach out to me. You can reach me at todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. Again, todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. I answer my own email. I'm happy to have a conversation and book something. I'm on social media through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through Instagram, and just to have a conversation. If you're kind of stuck, like you talked about earlier, Hamilton, if you can't see the forest for the trees, reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation to see if I can help you get you unstuck.
Wonderful, wonderful. Beth.
Well, thank you, Hamilton, for organizing all of this. This has been a lot of fun. For me, Todd gave me the idea of providing free coaching during this period of time. So likewise, if there is a need that somebody has an issue around talent management, please reach out to me. It's beth.miller@executive-velocity.com. You can reach me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I use my maiden name, so it's very easy to find me. There's only one of me. It's Beth ArmConnect, and it's ARMKNECHT Miller. So you can find me on LinkedIn and just send me a message, and we can hook up that way.
I am so glad that you pronounced your maiden name for me. And I didn't even ask for it, which is the best part. So now I won't have to butcher it for the rest of eternity. Todd, Beth, thank you so much for this morning and for your time and for your insight and your expertise. I know I'm a better person and I'm a better business person because of our conversation this morning. And I can only speak for the audience that they are as well. Thank you not only for your time, but for being on the show. I hope we can have part 2 and part 3 and part 4 in the future, maybe even in person. We'll see. But, you guys are the best. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Hamilton.
Thank you.
Absolutely. For everybody watching in, thank you for being with us on The Jungle. I'm your host, Hamilton Winters. Glad to be joined by Todd Palmer with Extraordinary Advisors and Beth Miller of Executive Velocity. Until next time, we'll catch you then. Have a good day, everybody. See you.